Hello, and welcome to the value of everything. So, keeping a little bit on the economic side of things, we will go and explore a very, shall we say, important factor which has been affecting westernized economies over the years, and it potentially is one of those little areas which does harbor a lot of issues, and from this issue, let's just sort of back up a little bit. It basically, once you say this word, it does sort of think that there's an incredible loss that's being made here. So everyone starts to think, oh my God, this is just an absolute incredible pain that we are experiencing. And really, it's just a total waste. And particularly in terms of national pride, it's an incredible waste. In terms or even national productivity, it would appear like an incredible waste. In terms of a number of things, it just seems like a waste and a problem, which is a complete it's a personal tragedy. So the topic is deindustrialization. Now, deindustrialization, obviously, I have to just go through the just basically the major term is basically where the manufacturing industry is in decline. So the amount that it's producing is going lower and lower and lower, and that is within a country sort of realm. So in a border of a country, their economy is recalibrating, and maybe recalibrating is sort of a bit of a fancy word, but maybe let's just say in decline. And manufacturing is being sent out or being replaced or not being used or not being utilized anymore. No more orders is going to the factory, and therefore there is downsizing, there is redundancies, the actual manufacturing industry is shutting down. So this is typical of what has been happening over the past 100 years, shall we say. Maybe less than 100 years, maybe 70 years, I would say. So firstly, obviously, we need to explore the personal aspect of this. Throughout time in history, we've had, if we go back to the UK times, there has been a massive flourishing of the Industrial Revolution, where massive textile industries were brought up out of nowhere. We have been able to support even larger and larger populations by the manufacturing industries and by farming and agricultural machinery. It's been an amazing beneficial thing for the amount of population that we sustain on this earth now. The Industrial Revolution obviously was a little bit of a problematic thing in terms of how strong, powerful men could carry and lift things and move things around. Now it's been a little bit changed, a little bit automated by like forklift trucks and things like that. But still, the manufacturing industry was still a area for men because it was one of those sort of skilled hand, physical labouring kind of areas. There is definitely a little area of systematizing, which is very beneficial for men itself. Men have got a very good spatial aware brain in comparison. I know this is a very sort of a narrow sort of view of thinking, but because there are women with good spatial minds, but it does benefit the men in general more to have a systemized processing. So factory runs and stuff like that and mechanics have all spawned from the Industrial Revolution. And it's one of those like last areas of a job for a man. A man can do his hard labor. He can feed his belly and then work down the mines and use a hammer or something like that, and just to crack off coal. Who knows what sort of masculine things would be done? But also, obviously, this has enabled women to be employed at mass at the same time. Women now anybody can, if it's like a machine that's doing the process, then somebody can just be operating it and pressing the buttons in the background. So it is an incredible thing which has occurred over time in history, and it still enables us to have fairly roles in our society of the man being the breadwinner and such like that. But also we've had economic production increase from the women as well by textile industries. That has been a massive boom, especially for like the UK, where the majority of all the textiles were being produced were from the UK. So, yeah, all net benefits, and it seemed like a fantastic area to go in. I guess there was things like workers' conditions and things like that which were being a little bit overlooked, but in general things were going quite swimmingly, and it was an enabler to really flourish and populate and provide an immense amount of growth for the world economies from the 1800s onwards. And the Industrial Revolution obviously is still kicking on in a great degree, and we see it happening in China. If you see any of those pictures of all the amount of stuff which is being created in China, putting onto container crates and shipped all over the world. So the Industrial Revolution is still around, and it still has its effects. However, I will go into the potential or the reasoning behind why things have been in decline for Western economies. But we have had an immense amount of deindustrialization in the sector of manufacturing. Now, obviously, manufacturing industry is something that's been around for some time. I guess you could say that there was master blacksmiths and things like that. So there was mechanical type people in the background throughout time, but to be in this kind of mechanized sort of factory operation system has only been sort of the last couple of 100 years. But you could see to a certain extent that this industry is a massive industry. It does, if you say the word, give an important amount of value, labor-saving devices, and increases the living standards of all by the amount of production of goods which is provided in the economy. There is definite questions over the value that is brought to the general environment, but as the environment is generally owned by the government, that has been turned a blind eye in terms of that in comparison to the wealth that has been generated. Hence why we've had just a lot of environmental issues which have been occurring over in China for the past few years, and they've been trying to reduce the amount of smog that has been left in their country. But because nobody owns the air, nobody owns certain areas of airspace, nobody can really countersue or ask certain tariffs for the amount of pollution levels which factories are causing. So, deindustrialization. We have this important personal aspect of. I will sort of go to the north of the UK because obviously that's one of the areas that I do understand a little bit better than most. But I'm sure this will pretty much be typical of most industries which have caught a little bit of decline. Just before I go any further, I just want to mention that there has been industries which have been flourishing in the past, say agriculture, which majority of us were peasants that worked or laboured in the farm, or serfs that laboured in the farms for the landowners throughout many years, and we were able to find work in industrial Britain or any other countries, which gave us a slightly better living standard. than just working purely on the farms just to sustain a tiny bit of food and a tiny bit of shelter. So just think of that in those terms. There has been moments in the past where we've had certain levels of living standards, and we had a massive thriving industry like agriculture, and we've moved on from that point. So that's an important just little thing to think upon just before we move on from deindustrialization or to the personal aspects of industrialization or deindustrialization. So north of England, if you would go around there now, a lot of the places have got a little bit of where you've got the cities, you've got regenerations, which have been supported a little bit by the governments, and they look a little bit thriving. There is like tiny little bars and clubs and areas around there which are slightly thriving, but if you just go a little bit outside of those areas, there is definite degradation. There is very bleak towns with the high street is just absolutely ruined with like payday loans and lots of charity shops and just not really much in the way of any kind of fantastic and enjoyous sort of shops to go entertaining yourself down. It's really a very bleak picture. In fact, it's more depressing for you to walk down a town like shopping sort of a high street than to not do it at all. So it's it is kind of bad. And obviously, if you think of the north of England, there is two little interesting sides. You do have like these little towns which can be incredibly depressing, but at the same time, there is some beautiful aspects of the country that always gets a little bit ignored by the north. But that's neither here nor there. It's just the way that obviously things tend to get a little bit depicted like it always rains in the UK. I guess it does rain quite a lot, but it's just one of those things. So, yeah. And obviously you've got this degradation which is occurring in like the high streets. There is obviously a little bit less money going around, particularly if you sort of venture outside of the really cool areas of the main city. So I'm talking about like if you go to Manchester or if you go to Liverpool or Newcastle, you're going to find like very trendy-ish areas. It's not like it's completely dilapidated, but if you go to certain areas, there are incredibly poor areas where majority of people are really unskilled and have not got any kind of real good abilities, or there's very low employment. A lot of people are on welfare. A lot of people haven't got too many marketable skills to be taken up by the workforce. It is there's a lot of quite a bit of obesity. I'm definitely in that category myself, but it's that there is these kind of things which have been occurred, which you potentially could point the finger at, where you had these honourable like jobs where people would go down to the mines or the shipyard, whatever they used to be doing in the past, and they would do a hard day's labour, and they could provide for their family, and they could sustain for their family. And the man's role was like the main patriarch in the family, and then you had the woman who potentially could have worked, but then also could have stayed at home and look after the children. So it was a fairly decent setup, and probably a lot of people migrated from these like peasant areas of agriculture into these industrial areas of Britain, and as gradually over time the actual industries have been in decline, and there has been more so redundancies and even shutting down of factories or mines to get things to this state, and all that you have is the remnants of the people and this sort of welfare-ish class left over. So it is a definite personal tragedy. It is an incredibly sorrowful sorry, let me try and say the words. It is incredibly sad. It is an unbelievably heartbreaking story of what has happened to entire generations. And this doesn't obviously just count to the north of England. It just happens to all over the world, where you do have this incredible industry which has just once was a boom town is now nothing at all, and there's all these social problems which have occurred where the family breadwinner has been shot to pieces, and there's a lot of pride and anguish that has been broken. It is a personal tragedy which is occurring, which it does get overlooked, and you can say that where you had the days of Margaret Thatcher, who was very pro-capitalism and anti-labour union. It was she was obviously the main pain in their lives, and it would seem that she was their direct pain in their lives, for shutting down all the mines and not enabling the union workers to provide them their best job benefits and things like that, and not allowing them to strike and things like that. So you do have this this important picture which was painted in the past. And there has been an immense amount of personal tragedy. So that gives you that element. Just on a side note, I must admit, I've obviously worked in the city. I've worked in a number of places around the world. I do meet, for every single northern person that I've met in the UK, I've found them fascinatingly intelligent, and like ridiculously intelligent as well, and very funny. I've never really met somebody that's sort of been dull and boring or anything like that. And even though sometimes their accents can sound a little bit that way, they're incredibly friendly people, and highly intelligent as well. But that may be certainly something to do with the brain drain, which I'll get into a little bit later. But I just want to clarify one point. It isn't just these very working class like animals that just go down to the mines and do nothing else. There has been an immense amount of benefits and beautiful creations and in machinery and inventions which have happened from the north, and there's artists and everything else which have occurred from that area. It's not just an area which should just be typically marked as some place for very low skilled workers. Okay, so over time, we can say that there has been, obviously, while I say this, I am a southerner, so I'm like the southern fairy, which is, by the way, there is a little thing which goes on between the north and the south. We get called the fairies, which just because we just type on our keyboards and we've got very soft hands, and we because we depict the northerners as monkeys. We animalize them, say that they're just these low-brained, like Neanderthal sort of pickaxe people that do nothing else. So it's there is always this little banter which goes on between the two, but you can quickly do that when you speak to a northerner anyway, and it's kind of a joke more than anything else. It's not necessarily anything that's personal, but I guess some people can take it personally. All right. Kind of like being called a fairy. Right. Okay, so next up we have dependency. Now, obviously where we've got deindustrialization, we have had dependency. So people have really, where they've moved into these areas where there's this industrial like revolution which is happening, and they have really sold into that aspect. They've got their house bought, they've got the mortgage, whatever else they've got the family. They have only been mastering one type of skill. I guess the way you look at factories and systemization and things like that, it does sometimes give you a very isolated view of the entire picture of what you do. So let me just explain something. So in terms of factory assembly lines, you when you start doing a process, it's much more efficient rather than you to build like a engine from all the parts to the end product. You're much better off just having a sort of, I can't even think of what the word is, but it's just like a treadmill which goes through, and people just add on little parts as that little engine goes through the factory. So people can add into the assembly line, and you've got this productive engine at the end. So it's just everyone has this very isolated, soloed process. So it does give you a little bit of a problem in terms of your ability and skills when you do work in these mechanical fields, and it doesn't give you quite so much the full grasp of all the aspects of that process. And that might be just a little bit of an issue of what has happened over time. You do have people that have been trained in using a pickaxe. You've had people trained in just putting one cog on one machine, or being able to fire rivets into a plate of steel, which may be fairly skilled, but it's just one single process. And if you've done that all your life, you're going to be highly skilled in that one fundamental field, but you're not trained in the important thing of adaptability. So throughout time, it's much better for you to have a few jobs so that you can learn that there's different ways and customs into different sort of like social areas of what the employment area that you've gone into. There's different ways in which you can master that process. There's things that you've learned from other employers which you can carry over to the other employer. I guess there has been sort of a certain amount of movement which is occurring in manufacturing industries, but I wouldn't say that it would be occurring as much so as, say, a service industry or something, an industry where you'd have to have quite a lot of adaptability. So that is a slight problem. Just on a side note, actually, I just want to say that there has been a tiny light thing of an industrial change in terms of Northern England, whereby where there has been an intense amount of manufacturing, has started to slightly convert into this low expense labour force, which can be worked as call centres. I know it doesn't sound like the most beautiful thing in the world to be in a call centre, but you can see that there has been a slight change in industry movement over time. Sorry, that's just a bit of an incredible divergence there. So there has been isolations of skills over time, and I'm just trying to get to a point of adaptability, and the main point of everyone being quite stuck in a process and dependent on a process which has been sustaining their life for a long time. Now, obviously, in these industries, everyone doesn't really like change too much. Everyone would like, in a certain way, I know sometimes for some people it wouldn't, for people that have had a lot of changes in their life, they probably wouldn't bother too much. But say for a young youth who hasn't really got any idea of what they want to do in life, if somebody came around to them and says, oh, there's a job for you right now, you can do this, I think a lot of children would go, or a lot of adolescents would go, yeah, I'll do that then. So there has been this pass down of one generation to another of people that have been doing these labouring jobs. That I guess they're semi-skilled, highly skilled in some areas of these industrial working jobs. So there has been this kind of idea of job for life. This job is going to be there forever, and my father was the same worker as I. Incidentally, my father and his father's father worked in labouring kind of jobs as well. They were market porters. So you can see, obviously, that has changed quite rapidly over time. Now you've got the next generation of the market porter working in the service industry. So it's, it's incredible how things can change over time. Now, next up is so we have had, apologies, I just need to refer to some things, these dependencies which have been occurring over time, and that is problematic. And obviously where we come into the job market and everything else, once these people get knocked out of that very highly skilled thing that they've learned all their life, imagine if you've just learned how to fire rivets into sheeted metal, and then all of a sudden they said there is definitely no work around, and there's no other shipyards, anything else that are around in this local area, unless you wanted to move out to China. There's literally, and you're obviously not going to get the visas or anything like that to move over there. There is no jobs for you now. So go down to the job centre and collect your benefits. You can see how that obviously has, and you're now a man who's in his 50s, whatever it is. You haven't really got too many many ways in the of which of skills of going down to a job interview and trying to sell yourself. It's really been you just got down to the yard every day and you've done your skilled job, and you have really isolated your processing and work into being into one field and nothing more. So I guess in some ways, manufacturing industries is a fairly static kind of job. It does. There is obviously high-tech industries, and if you're on the management floor and you're looking at how to better and systemize things as time goes on, you definitely have that important side of thinking of how to systemize things better and improve and adapt over time. However, if that isn't occurring, then you have incredible problems. You've got just a little bit of a shutdown of the brain. And in philosophy terms, you are what you repeat. And if you just repeat one thing and one thing alone, you are destined to not be an adapter. You will be very adaptive if there is the next boom in the industry and there's a bigger demand for shipbuilders who can fire rivets into the industry, but into steel for the industry. But in terms of anything else, if there is any change which occurs, and one of the fundamental things that you probably can guarantee in any sort of employment area is that there will be some kind of change in the future. And obviously things like automation and outsourcing does happen. You're going to be fairly isolated. So, and obviously there's the schooling systems, and there probably has been a lot of things which really hasn't helped out people that have worked in manufacturing industries. And obviously, if you've got this societal thing where everyone knows that they're going to be in this industry at some point in time, what is the purpose of me understanding all this schooling? Because my father was a miner, he was using a pickaxe. What is the point of me trying to learn a new skill, a new sort of thing about life, or just how computers work, whatever, when I know that I'm going to be a miner? I know that I've got a job for life. I know that I can get a house early. I can have a family, all this kind of stuff. I can go down the pub with my friends on a social level. This is a guaranteed job for me. So what is the point of me actually even being so curious to find out more information about what I can be and all of those things? So you can see that there is a social problem inside the manufacturing industry let alone just the actual problem of deindustrialization itself. So yeah, obviously there's been plenty of people that have educated themselves and got out of the thing of your family doing the one industry. But I mean, even from my personal side of things as well, I find that sort of thing of doing the same role that your father did. In fact, there's psychologically a lot of things to prove that you would want to do that. Is that you obviously want to? There's a certain element of people's brains to please their parents, or at least give them some kind of feeling that you've achieved something in your life. And if you can achieve something that mirrors something that your father has done, then there is something that sort of just says, yeah, I have achieved that certain area. Now, what I'm trying to get to is that your father or your mother has been sexually successful in producing you. So if you can achieve the same level of success as your father, then you should be meeting the certain requirements of survive and reproduce. So if you can achieve exactly to the same standard of your father can, then you will be able to survive and reproduce, and you have really sustained your prime directives as a human being. So there we go. So there's just certain areas in terms of if you can just replicate what your parents can do, then you have achieved. That again can kill off and stave off the curious mind. All right, so what has been happening over the years? There has been incredible amounts of communication, and there has been a little bit of unlocking of bureaucracy and things like that, which has opened the doors of globalization. So we have got more globalization which is occurring. So when we say globalization, it's basically where we're having more of a connection. There's more migration, there is more communication to all these different industries, which is enabling us to seek out more value or better profitabilities in this world. So globalization has been quite a good thing for economics. We have, if you just look at the world globe as a whole, as one country, you can see that the production of the world has been incredible. You might say the environment hasn't been that great, but the actual production of the world has been incredible since globalization has really taken off, and we could say probably kicking off around the same time as the degradation of the Western, the deindustrialization of the Western countries. Globalization has sort of counteracted and been the flourishing aspect. And we cannot sort of deny that it has been a very, very profitable, and it's definitely raised the living standards for a lot of Chinese and a lot of Indians and a lot of areas which surround those big countries. So, yeah, important things to think about there. So what has been happening? Now, it's not that people require less ships or require maybe they require a little bit less coal because it is a dirty fuel, but people haven't really been craving for less things. There has been demand for products. Everybody's psyche has always a yearning for more and more and more. We what's the word? It's something like we aspire for infinite goods, but the resources are finite. I butchered that, but you'll sort of see what I mean there. But yeah, there has been this massive demand of goods, and I'll get into a little bit later. There's been consumerism and these immense things which would have really given the Industrial Revolution a big pump up of output. However, it's just completely declined and degraded in the Western countries. So what's been happening there? Now, obviously you've had, let's just put it into a very sort of simple term of a factory owner noticing that there's certainly some opportunities in other countries where over time, say that we've been producing, say let's say the UK has been a net exporter of certain, let's say, ships. That's been an incredibly profitable thing, and that has, on the balance of trade, given the currency a very high margin. So the currency has become more and more expensive, so therefore the employment of those people has become more expensive as well. And then it comes to a point in which they realized, hold on a minute here, I know it's going to be quite expensive to move the entire factory to China, but if we look at the costs, if we can sustain the same level of expense in labor over time, within at least, let's say 2 years or 3 years, this factory will become far more profitable, and we'll be able to meet all the costs that were incurred from retooling and retraining and everything else into this foreign country. Because of the labor cost being so small, we can redeploy this factory into this new country. And obviously the managers will look around at that system. Some managers will be very empathetic and say, I don't want to really do this to the staff, it's going to be bad. But obviously some business owners are seeking value, and if other competitors are doing the same thing in terms of out-competing and producing goods at a cheaper level, then they have to stay competitive in the market as well, and they will make the same moves themselves. Now, you would say, okay, well, this is our problem. We have not really put any protection tariffs in place to keep the industry in that area, and That's the reason why globalization is the reason why the industrial revolution has just decayed in these Western countries. Now, let me just put in just one economical thing which is important here. If a factory was running at high labor costs, and then the owners have found a new way to produce the same good in a different country at a lower cost, there has been two economic things which have derived from this point. Firstly, there has been an increase of wealth by there's a couple of things here. There has been an increase of wealth of the people in this other country which are now producing this good. So they have got some economic benefit, which is more money in their pockets, more money in the government's pockets, whatever, is now coming into that new country, which means that they now can produce, can start producing goods. They've got their own capital to now purchase back off of, say, the UK. So China now has got money to purchase UK goods. Let's just put it in those terms. Also, the factory owners in the UK now are producing these goods where their factories are now redeployed in China, are producing these goods for a lot more of a lower cost. So therefore, their profit margin is a lot higher. So they either have a lot more in their pockets so that they can spend more money in Britain, or they can produce this good and sell it to, say, people of Britain, these ships to more people in Britin or around the world for a cheaper price, and that cost has lowered down. So those customers who have bought those ships have got more money to spend in other industries. So you can see that there has been a definite wealth effect which has occurred in the general economy. Now, there has been a counteract of that. People have lost their jobs in the meantime. We're not looking at, I'm talking about all the hidden benefits which have occurred in replacement of these northern people which have lost their jobs. So it does look like economically there has been a lot of more benefits which have been occurring abroad than in comparison to in the UK, which probably is slightly correct. However, there has been certainly turns in the tide. China do now buy up a lot more luxury goods and I would imagine as they really get more and more money as time goes on, that they will be able to purchase more and more goods as time goes on. And basically, seeing that the value has a value has been created and there is more money to spend in countries like the UK now, a different industry has been enabled because of this wealth generation. So the managers of the original factory owner can now employ gardeners to garden and mow their lawns, whatever they need to do. They now have more money in their pockets so that they can put it into the investments like the financial service industries or the property, so they can purchase larger properties for themselves. So you can see where I'm going here anyway, but there potentially is definite industries where it can increase the living standards of other people. However, there are bubble industries as well where it doesn't increase the living standards of other people, and that's slightly the problem that we're in today. But neither here nor there, this redeployment of the factory from one place to another in a global sense has really been very profitable because it has raised the living standards for a lot of people and has enabled people to purchase more things. And if you can think of where we were, regardless of what was going on, where we was exporting ships at a high cost, now we have to rethink of a different industry, or we've got this new industry which can be spent on. So obviously people have got this excess of money now, which they can spend on a new industry. So it can be in the service industries. Maybe people would like to buy themselves computers instead of buying ships. There is a definite increase because the cost price of building these ships have gone down incredibly, and now people have got more money to spend on other things. And if you think in general of people nowadays, when you buy all these plastic goods and all these like toys for adults, cameras, they're all pretty cheap and within the range of what we can afford now. However, there has been things which have become more expensive, like houses. So you can see that there is definite drivers, and there's been reallocations of wealth into different areas. But the problem is, in some terms, that some of the business areas have been places which haven't raised the living standards. Now, if there was a big drive of building more and more houses, which there hasn't because there's been a shortage of land release and things like that, then it's just created a gigantic asset bubble. But that is obviously for some other podcasts. I have made some definite pointers of the property bubble. So there you go. There is a bit of globalization for you. It has raised the living standards for all, and it has enabled us to redrive and recreate new economies which weren't discovered before. So we now see that there is a lot more high-tech industries. There's a lot more things that are available for us on the internet now than what would be compared if we were all stuck building ships and just hitting coal in a mine. All right, so let me just work a little bit as well. So obviously the goods have changed a little bit over time as well. So first major industries which were manufacturing goods which have been created were textiles. I would say in obviously there has been a lot of other stuff, but if we could generalize, textiles were like the main industry which was being pumped out into the world. Obviously, majority of textiles is happening in a lot more poorer countries. I wouldn't say necessarily it's always China that you hear, but there is a definite textile area in China. But you do get things like Indonesia and these little side countries of China and India. Textiles are being manufactured in India as well. So textile industries have moved around to different areas, and really, goods have changed over time. People really have different value terms of what is better than others. Now, there has been definite drivers for more high-tech gadgets. So everybody likes luxurious phones like the iPhones. I know it doesn't sound too luxurious, but for Westerners, but it is a luxury good. People like high-tech industrial goods, which does require a kind of highly sophisticated, fairly skilled working practice to produce those goods. And you do still need a fairly low labour cost at the same time. So that's fairly important. Just to sort of specify that where we would have things like coal or building ships, these very large mechanical objects, or these incredible like raw materials. I guess raw materials are still demanded on high levels. Things have been miniaturized and gadgetized. So we are producing these smaller and smaller things, and I think that really has been more so the thing of Asia and Asian countries. They have been the ones really which have been, like if you think of the Japanese in the 80s, they were the miniaturizators. They have been able to produce these gadgets which are smaller and smaller, which have been able to consume less and less energy and produce more and more and more. And not to say that obviously the software, which still is probably the software industry is really held by America still to this day, I would say. But when it comes to manufactured goods, it is high-tech miniaturized objects, which have been sort of like the main thing of, say, countries like South Korea. So there has been this industrial change, and if you look back at UK, where is UK? They're not there to be even seen. And even if you could say that if this slightly larger goods like the manufacturing of cars, this is the country that produced the Rolls-Royce and things like that, where is the industry? Completely gone. Where is the motorcycle industry? Completely gone. So obviously, Britain isn't a country which shouldn't be limited in these factors of producing these goods. The first computers were created in the UK. It's really strange how All of this high tech, like the very frontier of manufactured goods, should be still in the north or somewhere around in the UK, but just completely obliterated. Nothing to be seen here at all. What potentially would have caused that? So, important things to look at here. I think we need to go and start looking at the use of force. So, two little areas we need to look at, and that is the labour union movement and the government. Now, with regards to the labour union movement does sound and it does appeal to a lot of workers. It basically provides them with incredible things. So, for starters, if you work in a mine or if you work in some kind of steel makers or whatever, a smelter or anything like that, there will be a labour union movement that comes around, and they'll say, if you join our union movement, we will fight for you. We will fight against your employer to ensure that you've got a higher decent living wage, and there is higher safety standards for you. There is less working hours. You will be provided with all these great, fantastic things. If you just pay a little bit of a monthly fee, we can work hard for you, and sometimes we might ask you to create picket lines with us, just so that we can extract as much wealth from these greedy fat cats as possible. And it does sound fairly appealing. There's a lot of benefits in return for just this slightly marginal fee to join this union. But with everything, there is short-term benefits for very long-term pains. And when we sign up to these union movements, we do have certain issues. We are using force against an employer, and it might not just be just this greedy fat cat that is just extracting wealth and he's really living it up, and you're just trying to get there. At some point in time, if you look at the industries of the UK, there was a big car manufacturing industry. And also what there was a big union movement at the same time. And as gradually over time, the problem is that these unions were demanding more and more for their workers, but the production levels was getting worse and worse. They were basically trying to get their cake and eat it. Now, at the same time, you've got these the factory owners, which are really worried about the profit margins, and if the labour force gets more and more expensive, then they will run themselves out of business. And as that has happened in the UK, the labour union movement and a certain thing of obviously the profit motive has destroyed the entire industry of the UK. So the factory owners have gone, okay, well, the unions really are ruling the roost now. I really don't have any control over them. We don't have enough time to even innovate and produce better goods now. This is really getting harder and harder for us. And because the workers are demanding more and more for less and less, we are being outcompeted against our rivals, which are producing goods from foreign countries. It's time to shut down the factory, or it's time to move the factory to a different location, which has got freer employment rights, where people can, where the employers do not have control of the company. So a forceful control of the company, may I say. Now, if you've got a cooperative company which is occurring, where people are all voluntary members of how the direction of the company goes, then there is no use of force there, and it's probably quite a good system to work by. However, if you have the use of force which you're applying against the employer, then you do have a fairly disastrous effect which occurs. Because there is certain things like greed, and you would want more and more, but you're not really that union movement is obviously got the one marginal thing that it's looking after, which is the employers. I guess sometimes they can say they can look at the industries that they're in, but it is a dangerous thing that they can find themselves in, because they will be outcompeted and eventually obliterated by their own self-greed. It sort of is the same thing as every kind of socialism. If you start destroying the wealth generation, the product innovation, the efficiency drivers, then eventually you're screwed because you've got nothing else to live on or live by. So that is one of the major problems of the industries of Britain. Obviously, I've just mentioned a little bit about schooling and things like that, how there hasn't been this inclination of retooling factories. Now, if you think of it in certain terms, where you've got these big northern areas, you must have these massive industrial estate areas where they're just dilapidated. They've got these massive grounds. They've probably got areas which you could probably manufacture goods. However, you've got all these certain laws which make it very hard for you to recover any kind of industry. So say if you were some northern lad who was playing around an old factory and thought, okay, I've got this good idea. I could start making this good for a cheap price. I just need to employ some people, but really at a very low cost. But you could probably find a couple of people that might be able to do the work for you. But then the government comes along and they say, oh, hold on a minute here. The minimum wage is this price. You are undercutting them. You cannot really start this industry at all. So really, where you have a decay of an industry, you do have obviously an opportunity to buy up factories at very low costs and things like that, still have fairly low expense of labour forces. But when you have a welfare system in place which is paying for people so that they have no drivers to find work themselves, or less of an incentive to find work themselves, and then you have the government coming in and saying that there is a minimum wage here, you need to pay these staff this minimum wage at the same time, you have really dampened the effect of rerouting and regenerating an industry from scratch again. So probably the best thing for the North to be is just to obviously say there is no more minimum wage, and really there's less bureaucracy. Let's just say that we're lifting all the regulations and red tape in terms of starting your own industrial company. Obviously, there just needs to be a little bit of a safety aspect of like high explosives and things like that, which happens in China recently. But yeah, it's just that you need some kind of rerouting of the economy. And if you think about these people that have really had the chance, it's been the people that have had the opportunity to just try things out and done things with fairly low costs and just worked things from there. And once you have this slight build of an industry, you have certain minds which are working together, which are working to systemize things a little bit better and grassroots and produce something in today's modern era, like, say, a new mobile at a low cost, and try to make it like as high-tech and automated as possible, you could have some really good regeneration of high-tech industry. Now, let's not say there has been high-tech industry which is still available, and I think it is one of the bigger things in the UK still to this day. But I'm just talking about regeneration in itself and how it could have occurred, but it hasn't because of a number of fundamental factors of cheap labour force, which has enabled definitely more production in the world. And also the factor of society, and the factor of the barriers to entry. Okay, so not without mentioning anything else. So obviously I've covered the area of the union movement, who has been really sort of like the major employer over time now. So since the Industrial Revolution, what has transferred? The job market. So I've mentioned beforehand, we've had this increase of capital because obviously the factory owners have got this money in their pockets now. They've got to spend it on something else unless they're weird hoarders. There has been a change of industry where we have gone into a service industry where we are crunching over theorized things. So we're producing, we're potentially investing in foreign lands who are producing other goods. We are creating financial services like insurance and trading systems, all these kind of technical, internet-based. I'm in a little bit of an erring session. Technical-based, internet, web-based businesses. There has been this little changeover in terms of where we're using these manufactural goods and changing ourselves over to the service industry. And it really is a little bit strange because in some degree, some of the industries that we have been creating are non-value producing industries. So let me just explain. So the housing market, if we start to buy the same house that we bought 10 years ago, but for an incredibly higher price, even when we work out the rates of inflation, then we have really just thrown resources into an asset bubble. And a lot of the service industries have been really created by asset bubbles. So where we look at living standards and allocations of money, we haven't really provided an increase of living standard, and we have increased the bubble. So people have found themselves on net a little bit more wealthier by being these property portfolio investors, and not really anybody around them or anybody else been seeing the benefits of producing this good, because it has already been produced and it's just one of those things like a tulip or something like that, which hasn't really got much tangible value. It doesn't make anything efficient. It hasn't really labor saved us in any way. It hasn't freed up us of any more time to do any other stuff. Think of the industries that could have been created if we weren't all funneled into a big, bubbly service industry. So if you think to yourself, we could have been into more robotics. We could have had labor hands, which could have helped us in the house. All these kind of things, these industries, which could have flourished. High tech, and obviously, if you think of Silicon Valley, they have been creating things which have been really efficiency drivers. They have been producing things like Excel and software which has created databases and improved efficiencies and movements and logistics and cost savings, which has and the speed in which we can do things, which has improved the living standards of all, and hence why Silicon Valley is a highly productive industry and has raised our living standards. However, on the other side of the scale, and that's why we're walking around, that's why I'm giving you a podcast, all these things which have been occurring, which have raised our living standards. However, if you look at some of the service industries, they haven't really been raising our living standards. And if anything, if a service industry really should be lowering costs for you more so than anything else, or being faster and more efficient. And in some ways, some things have been a little bit faster and more efficient in terms of services, but in general, it hasn't been an incredible, for the amount of employment and asset allocation which has gone into an industry, it has really been fueling the beast of a bubble more so than fueling an actual, the living standards being raised by the people. So it's an important factor and should never be overlooked. Also, you just got to think of another little aspect of human society. If everybody has been, and obviously this goes to the same thing about society of thinking, if my dad's going to be a miner, I'm going to be a miner, so what's the point in educating myself? There has been the thing of consumerism. Everybody is interested in sort of a glamorous product, or been sort of focused upon, let's say the word high status, more so than high happiness. So that has obviously given us the value pool of money being funneled into bubbles, like having the high status house, or the high status boat, or the high status diamond ring, whatever all those industries have, which really haven't given us anything productive in terms of the happiness industries, which has been sort of devices which has given us more time to do things and be more creative and do things that we want to do and stop us from doing mundane things like doing the ironing, the washing, all those kind of things. So consumerism has been an important factor which has really given us a little bit more of a inclination to fuel the flames of bubble, non-productive, living standard raising industries in comparison to like your traditional industries which may produce a new car, a new robot, a new anything really which can improve the quality and the happiness of people. And that may be one of the important factors which has degraded industries which could have flourished incredibly more and given maybe an opportunity for like the northern industries to go, okay, well, maybe it's not really time for producing ships anymore, but there is robotics which are coming around the corner now. Let's get into robotics. So that has obviously been, the consumerism has been an important factor in this whole grand scheme of things. Next factor is the government obviously comes in. They obviously are the next proponent of the use of force so that they can extract taxes from people. So the wealth generators, they can extract taxes from these wealth generators. Okay, maybe they are entwined into the bubble, but some of them may be genuine wealth generators that are producing very good high living standard goods. The government comes in, they tax from them, which they could have expanded their business or their business model to improve things, and then they funneled it into giving other these unemployed people work skills, which may not be an industry which is really coming into the fro. Really, where you're training somebody for the present. Really, where you should be training somebody for what potential trend is coming around the corner. The government also has an important factor on that and in the whole state of how things work, because they have been trying to inflate the economy. They make a lot of promises for the future or for the now, and it has to be paid off. So they issue bonds and things like that, and it creates this ever cycle. They have quantitative easing, which increases lowers the cost of debt, and also they increase the money supply in the system. And in general, that has given us an inflating trend in the cost of a lot of objects. So inflation has rapidly caught up with a lot of purchasing of goods. Now, I would say that there has been certainly deflation in a lot of manufactured goods in terms of how everything else has become really more expensive, like the inflation of houses, the inflation of going down to the shops and buying food goods. However, in comparison to everything else, you find that buying manufactured goods, like if I wanted to go down to a DIY store and buy myself a spade, I reckon I could pick one up for $10. So things like that, the manufactured goods have been incredibly cheap. So there has been a definite element of replaceability which has occurred, which again degrades the thing of manufactured industries, because we're seeing that these goods are so cheap in comparison to replace them in itself, which has given a lesser driver for the demand to replace and fix things, and giving more so of a demand to just build more goods and extract more shit from the ground to produce more shit to put into landfills and destroy the environment a little bit more, or maybe do something maybe which may not be beneficial to the environment. Also, we have things like so we've got this taxing thing, which we're taxing people now, potential wealth generators which may have expanded businesses, and we are now paying for welfare and other things which are keeping these industries alive. So it's I know you could say, okay, well, these people haven't got any option, they're stuck, they've got no other industry to go on, but there could have been certain wealth generators which are in the industries which could have started new factories, new businesses, and it hasn't happened. Also, the major factor here is that there isn't enough economic freedom, so that, which I touched upon earlier, where people could have purchased these factories at very low costs and employed staff and had less and less red tape, so that they could regenerate, and there could have been more grassroots in these northern towns or these deindustrialized towns, where they could have started off again and had the economic freedom to start up a new business, say robotics, whatever they needed to be doing to produce a good which would have been creating value for people at large. Obviously, as the service industry has improved and got bigger and stuff like that, you have seen that the trade of commerce has been occurring in these very small sort of specialized areas of town. So where you've got Manchester, you've got London, you've got Newcastle, you've got Birmingham. These little areas are still quite fairly rich because commerce can sort of go through and funnel through these areas. However, you haven't really got so much of the thing happening in the outside areas. And this is an issue in terms of brain drain as well. So all of these towns where you might have had these bright sparks and entrepreneurs, or these people that had got a very good systematizing mind to create these new factories, have really been going into these central areas of commerce to produce things for the service industry, which may be bubbly itself. So it's a slight brain drain, and the brain drain potentially is even more of a dangerous brain drain because the brain drain is going in towards a bubble economy at the same time. So where all this fantastic intellect, where this population growth has occurred and all this training and education has happened, if it's all being funneled into an industry which is a bubble, then that, if you could only think of the incredible cost that has led to the deindustrialization of our minds in itself. So it's incredible in that respect. That gives you definite some ideas of deindustrialization. Obviously, the narrative, it seems in Western economies, is that it is an incredible waste. And in some ways, in some pointers which I've highlighted it to, it has been. But on a global economy scale, it has been an incredible benefit for a lot of people around the world. If anything, it has been a net benefit. The problem being is that things like the use of force have come into the mix with the trade union movements, with the governments, with the corporatocracy as well. With the social elements of consumerism, with the, the education system failing to teach us about raising living standards and being more funneled towards consumerism. There has been all of these very, very important factors which have kicked in and really stifled Western economies, which is very important, and that is just it. You always will see the narrative of these unemployed people that have had this industry, this job for life, and they are in a world of ruin. But it is important to think that there not only is that cost which is occurring, but there is very important other costs which are occurring as well to this day. And it may not even just be purely based upon that single narrative alone. There is a lot of things which are occurring beyond this point, which need to be explored. The use of force is probably one of the biggest problems in the entire scheme, but also the way in which we are told how to think and how our minds are working in the time, and how masses can be totally in a grip of a state of delusion in terms of how the property market is always going to expand, or how we're in delusion of how the economies are all turning into service industries, but the service industry isn't producing anything for our living standard. There's all these very important things which we should be focusing on when it comes to the deindustrialization. The word isn't really deindustrialization, which is the most important thing to think about, but it is degrading the living standard probably is the more important thing, and what are the factors which have been occurring to give us this gradual bleed to the point of where we are today. Okay, so yeah, get definite things to think about there. I've sort of I'm just continuing this on a little bit from there was a podcast that I did about Jeremy Corbyn with the Labour Union movement, which probably has got a little bit of a lot of connections between this one and that one. So I'm sorry if there's a little bit of repetition going on there, but it's definitely an important thing to think about, especially if it is going to be a continuous narrative now between seeing that we have got incredibly poor economics which is occurring today, and we do have the potential of corporatocracies or labour union movements which can use more and more force to get their way to destroy living standards. So yeah, thank you very much for your time as always, and I will be back for more. Goodbye.